right here.
These two?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. Where do you want to sit?
It's Bethany. I'm going to be your tour guide for the next 55 minutes or so, give or take a couple depending on traffic. Now, I'm not from Halifax originally. I was born and raised in Kingston, Ontario, but Dalhousie University attracted me to this beautiful coast about 5 years ago. Summerside? Awesome. Anyone visiting us from Newfoundland or Labrador? How about Quebec? Anyone from Ontario with us? Awesome. Okay, so you folks up here, where are you from in Ontario? Sorry? Oakville, welcome. What about you guys up here? Stratford! Oh my gosh, a beautiful, beautiful spot. I think I missed a group. You guys at the back, we're in Ontario. Beautiful, welcome. Anyone visiting us from Manitoba today? Saskatchewan? Alberta? Anyone from... Oh, okay, I think we've covered everyone. Once again, welcome to you all. Now there is one last introduction we have to do here. That, of course, is the vessel that we're on, folks. You know it as the Harbour Hopper, but it was built as a Lark 5. That stands for lighter amphibious resupply cargo, and the 5 stands for 5 tons. This was designed to carry. These vessels were built for use in the Vietnam War to bring troops and supplies into the beaches and jungles. Now, the U.S. military actually built the Cambridge Military Library. Unfortunately, they don't have an online tour schedule, but if you'd like to schedule one, you can phone them up. They will make something work with your schedule. I'm sure they'd be happy to hear from you. And that'd be a great spot to go if military history is your niche. Now, those of you on the upper right, over here, here's where the trees are going to come into play, so please just watch out for that. There's 5 of them. They might come a little bit close, so please be careful. Now we are going to be turning down on the Spring Garden Road. Spring Garden is known as the busiest pedestrian street east of Montreal and north of Boston. Just about 15,000 people on average walk up and down every single day, and perhaps soon to be more. They're doing a major reconstruction effort on the roadway to actually make more space for pedestrians. It's going to be converted into a pedestrian street. One bus route will still go down it, but the rest of the space for pedestrians only. Now as we come down onto Spring Garden here, interesting fact, this lower section is actually built on top of about 25,000 graves. Definitely shocking, I know. Now, unfortunately there was a Centre for Our Cities Unhoused where our Halifax Memorial Library stands today. And there was a lot of people, of course, who needed to use that facility. Well, sicknesses would spread very quickly, and there just wasn't the medical care that we have today. So when things like typhoid would pass through, many deaths occurred at once, and they were buried under here. Now, a designated area for those burials, the old burying ground here, opening just one day after those settlers arrived in Halifax. Very shortly after the first few graves were dug, those iron gates had to go up. People were just dying to get in. One notable person I want to talk about who's buried in there, a man by the name of Major General Robert Ross. He fought bravely in the Napoleonic War that those settlers arrived on when they arrived here, started on when they arrived here in 1749. Construction took just about a year, and it was finished by the summer of 1750, with its first church service there being September 9th of that year. That actually makes it the oldest place of Protestant worship in North America. So, pretty cool old building. It still holds active services. And believe it or not, there's a pew within there permanently preserved for whoever sits on the throne of England. Acknowledge that we in Halifax are on unceded and unsurrendered Mi'kmaq territory. This area was inhabited by the Mi'kmaq people for about 15,000 years prior to European settlers arriving here in 1749. And of course, the name Halifax only came in 1749 too. Before then, it was known as Chibuktuk, meaning Great Long River, and you're going to see when we get out there why that is so fitting. A lot of the history I'm talking about today as well is from 1749 onwards, so I'd just like to acknowledge that as well. Now you can probably tell here we're on a great gathering place in the city. Concerts take place here, protests, sometimes ceremonies. You'll also notice folks just coming down to enjoy their lunch from their breaks in the surrounding office buildings. So you'll often see people hanging out in here. Now as we turn over to the left-hand side, you're going to see the Fine Fisherman restaurant beside us. This is a great place to grab some seafood. we're just about to turn onto Brunswick Street here. Brunswick Street was originally known as a barrack street because of the barracks located at the north and south ends of the road, where soldiers who worked up in the garrison would live, eat, and sleep. Well, there were also a lot of bars down along here at the time, and soldiers were known to visit them quite a bit. But because of their frequent visits through the different bars, locals actually started calling this street a bit of an unfavorable nickname. They knew it as Knock-A. Minutes later, the explosion went off. All glass in the city imploded, but the heavy curtains actually stopped the glass from reaching any of the students. So with a little bit of sternness, she saved their eyesight, potentially lives. Folks, as we climb up the hill here, you get a great view of our old town clock. This is actually one of our most famous views in Halifax. This here was commissioned by Prince Edward, the Duke of Kent, finished in 1803. It actually still uses the exact same clock mechanism it was built with, believe it or not. Now folks, as we come around here, before I talk a little bit more about the fort, I want to point out to you our 5th annual Kite Festival. This is super cool. Sometimes the Harbour Hopper though does get stuck on these kites. It's happened a couple times, happened to me yesterday. So that's always a fun part, but this truly is so fun to watch. People come for the weekend and they fly their kites. It's always cool to see the different ones and just to see people getting out, having a good time together here instead of at home. Now folks, now that we've made it through tangle-free with the kites, now the taller of the two, you can see a flag flying now, the taller of the two used to signal what ships were coming into harbor, what time they'd come in, what pier they were docking at, and how many. Whereas the shorter of the two used to be part of a long-distance signaling system. Now, I think this system's pretty cool. It could actually send a message all the way from here to Annapolis Royal, about 150 kilometers away, in a little over an hour. I know for today's standards, that's not very quick, but for back then, remarkably fast. They'd use blue flags and black discs. The signal would go up on this mast. Of course, different combinations coded different things, and each fort would have a copy of the code. Once that was sent up on this mast, out in the harbor, Fort Charlotte would observe that, copy the same signal up on her mast, the next fort on would do the same, and so on, until it had reached its final destination. So, Captain Mark just informed me that flag up there, they do actually put up real flags. That one means SF Bates and Fort George here. I know if you wanted to take a visit in and see these lovely folks, learn a little bit more, you could definitely do so. You'd be greeted within by the Living History program. They have folks that dress up in traditional era clothing, and they can talk to you about what they're taking their view behind, pushing them forward, and just when they think they're getting to the top, they tumble in. Well, if you were unlucky enough to have that happen, your luck was about to get a lot worse, because soldiers would be waiting, pointing their muskets out the surrounding windows of the inner wall, and you can take a pretty good guess as to what would happen next. Just up ahead of us here, folks, we have some of the original building material of Fort George. This is ironstone you'll see on this wall jutting out. Ironstone was chosen because it's very resistant to cannon and musket fire. Not so resistant though to the elements here in Halifax. It does rain or snow on average of about 170 days per year here. Welcome to the Halifax Harbour. We have just entered here the second largest natural ice-free port in the entire world, second only to the one in Sydney, Australia. Now, I do have a personal problem with this fact, because of course Sydney, Australia does not get the winters we do. I think we should be number one for ice-free port, but that's a bond for somebody else. We're also very important for shipping here in North America. We actually place 6th for gross tonnage coming in and out of a port per year. So lots of container ships coming through our waters. Sometimes they dock at just jobs. So of course, with speed on their side, that certainly helps. They still had to escort convoys across the Atlantic Ocean, putting them constantly in the line of danger, which is why there's only one of them left today. Not only does that boat have claim to fame of being the last one, it was actually featured in Tom Hanks' new movie Greyhound about the Battle of the Atlantic. I don't know if any of you folks have seen that film. I've heard some really good things about it so far, so if any of you guys are now dying to go home and watch it, keep an eye out for the Sackville.
Are you sleepy?
Now, I certainly would recommend at some point during your visit walking the entirety of the boardwalk, folks. Lots to see and do down along here, as you've already experienced slightly. There's all sorts of stuff you can learn as well. Along the boardwalk, you'll find that there's different plaques and monuments to all sorts of different things. Groups who've immigrated here, shipwrecks, people who fought in different conflicts, notable folks who come out of Halifax. I find it's worthwhile to, come down here, just take a minute out of your walk to kind of look at those plaques, and you can always learn something new. Our boardwalk is 3.8 kilometers long, so of course if you get tired during that walk, you can stop in on those hammocks there, take a little rest. They are quite popular though, so when you see a free one, you gotta snag it quick. As we make our turn out this way, folks, the boardwalk continues all the way down there. Still lots to see at that end: the Canadian Museum of Immigration, the Discovery Center, Pier 21, and our Seaport Farmers Market. Now, one island here in the harbor I want to talk about a little bit, George's Island here, the one closest to us. Now, like I mentioned from the top of Citadel Hill, that would have been the first point of communication with that signaling system. You can actually get over to George's Island these days. It just opened up to the public last summer. Parks Canada did a major reconstruction effort, making sure it was safe for people to go and walk around and explore. So now you can get over there, explore the underground tunnels and bunker systems. Really cool spot, especially if you'd like to learn a little bit more about the forts involved in the defense of Halifax and our harbor. Now, as we walk down the board, or as we come back down the waterfront this way, folks, what on earth are they to do in the face of this freezing cold? Now, thankfully, people all around, they heard about the predicament they were in and they wanted to help. But the people of Boston actually went above and beyond. They declared a state of emergency in their own city, and they started loading up a train. Blankets, medical supplies, lumber. Some people even donated window panes out of the... Now, they were established 1759, just 10 years after those European settlers arrived. Long-standing naval history and traditions here in the city of Halifax. What you can actually do is lower the center portion of it right down into the water. You can drive a boat as big as the Halifax there, labeled 330, right onto it, lift it right out of the water. Now, the Halifax, that is one of our city-class frigates, the first of its class, but it is pretty cool that is able to work. Now, over here, folks, we have the 700 series vessels. This is known as the Kingston class, named after my hometown, Kingston, Ontario, known as MCDVs, Maritime Coastal Defense Vessels. These are often manned by the naval reservists. There are lots of kind of warships that the Canadian Navy has. Now, if you don't know what to look for, you probably wouldn't see too much, but these have some pretty interesting pieces of weaponry on them. I'll start with talking about the helicopter deck. So first off, that back flat portion, you can land a helicopter in there. The hangar is just inside that garage door. On top, right above there, you'll see that white dome-like object. Now, that is the corrosive weapon system. It is a 6-barrel, 20-millimeter Gatling gun, and it can actually fire 75 rounds per second. So, very, very efficient. It's for kind of close-in targets, so it's kind of the ship's last defense. And basically what you do, you switch that on, it takes care of the ship itself. It has all sorts of sensors and things like that that just allow it to operate automatically. You'll see it under the funnel there where there's the grate and the Canadian maple leaf. There's a flat panel with some tubes behind it. Now, those tubes are actually the Evolved Sea Sparrow missiles. What those do is they shoot straight up into the air, they pitch on their side, and they evolve to 4 times the speed of sound to hit a target over 50 kilometers away. So, pretty cool stuff. Further up ahead, you'll see there's all sorts of radar they have there. Of course, for keeping the ship safe. A big part of defense is, of course, your weapons, but of course they have to be able to sense what's coming at them. So a lot of those operating so that they can kind of keep an eye on their surroundings. deck again, we have, there's a harpoon hanger right where there's that orange, I think that's a life raft that they have there. I've learned from him. And if you guys do have any further questions about the Navy, you can ask me, I'll try my best, but Captain Mark really is a wealth of knowledge, and I'm sure he'd be happy to answer any of your kind of naval-related questions after the tour, if you're interested in learning a little bit more. Now, as we get ready to exit here, folks, once again, there's going to be a few bumps. Please be mindful of that. Brace yourselves as needed. Captain Mark is also going to phone in, tell Halifax traffic, hey, we're out of your hair for the next hour, and then we'll be on our way. We do have some interesting connections, so I'll talk about those. First of all, I'll talk about some background, though, so we can all get on the same page. Now, the Titanic, largest luxury liner of its time, truly a remarkable ship, folks. A lot of people were excited about this vessel. A lot of people wanted to be on board with all the publicity. So, when the ship departed Southampton, England, April 10th, 1912, it was nearly full with 2,207 passengers on board as far as we know. Now, sailing was fine the first few days, but on the evening of April 14th at about 11:40 p.m., the ship struck an iceberg. By 2:20 the next morning, fully submerged. Now, I know 2 hours and 40 minutes sounds like a long time, but for a ship of that size, and for trying to get 2,000 people off a boat, that is very, very quick. It actually should have taken hours longer to go down, but there were a few contributing factors to this. Number one, the metal that the hull of the Titanic was made out of. It was made using number 3 wrought iron, but the standard of boat building at the time was number 4. Two very different alloys. The number 3 was cheaper, but it had a lot more sulfur in it, making it naturally more brittle.